All the parts are in. Let's get started. As you guys know, I've been having some issues with my firewall, and in my last few videos I've definitely tried to take care of those things. In my previous video I unboxed and did a quick overview of this Norco RPC-231 rack mounted case, this guy here on the bottom. And this guy actually just came in today, so I'm gonna actually have all my parts together so I can finally get the firewall in its final resting spot and actually get it in the rack. This I picked up. This is a Thermaltake TR2 430 watt power supply, ATX power supply. And the reason why I got this is because the power supply that I'm using temporarily has a fan on top of the unit, and that doesn't do me any good because this 2U rack mounted case here, that fan would actually be blowing right into the top of the case, which doesn't do anything. This guy, as you can see, the fan is on the front, and there's another fan on this side, so I get actually some good airflow going through the unit and then out of the case. So I thought I'd unbox this for you real quick before I get started on actually rebuilding the firewall. You get some documentation, and let me pull this out. And then conveniently you get a box called power cord. So I'm going to assume that that's what's in here. Yes, there's a power cord in there, and there's something else in there. Screws, which are useful. And then here's the actual unit. Now this is not a modular power supply, but that's okay. It's not a lot of cables because it's only 430 watt. These are sleeved, which is cool. And here's the back, so you have a fan here, and then here's the other side. You have a power switch, which is nice, your plug for your power cord, and your voltage selector if you need to do that. Other side is plain, and I'll turn this around so you can actually check out the voltage values there. Pretty simple power supply, but you know it's what's needed because of where the fans are, and this is going to work out really well. There's a 5-year warranty on this, which I thought was really good. Eco-friendly, which I suppose is always good as well. Back of the box, and this is the connectors that we have. And because this is the firewall, I only have a couple of hard drives and the CD drive and the motherboard, so there's not a ton of you know, I don't need a ton of different connectors, but you know, this is going to work out nicely, I believe. So now that I have everything, I can finally put everything together. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I guess I should talk about the continued problems that I was having with my firewall, because even when I put the new firewall in service, I was still having the problem. And to make a long story really short, it turned out that my cable modem needed to be updated so that the starting IP range that it was doling out to my one network card wasn't in conflict with the second network card of my firewall. So after all of that time and rebuilding and moving firewalls and whatever, I finally figured it out. And that's okay. I think it was probably a good idea anyways that I took that firewall out of service, because it, you know, that computer was pretty old and it had that bulging capacitor, so who knows how long it would have lasted. But you know, I got a good almost 3.5 year run out of it without any issue, and that's pretty good by my standards. So I can finally get the new one in place in the final spot, and then I'll be happy, and hopefully I'll get another, you know, 3 years of service out of this one, and maybe more. Firewall's been pulled out of the rack, hopefully for the last time here, and I'm gonna take note of a couple things before I actually take all the hardware out. First off, I want to make sure that I keep track of what individual network card is plugged into what slot, and I want to make sure that I've got the hard drives plugged in correctly as well. I've got 2 different color SATA cables, and then I'll just keep track of where they're plugged in on the motherboard. Everything's out. So just a recap, I guess. I got a couple of 80 gig hard drives that I have in RAID 1 2 network cards. This is the I/O shield, and of course the motherboard. Just prepping the new case here. I've taken the hard drive cages out, so these were originally here, and just unscrew those, and I need to do that so I can get the motherboard in place. And as I see the open case, the one thing that we have to remember here is that my network cards have full height brackets here, and I need a low profile one for these, but of course when I originally got these cards there weren't any low profile brackets included. So I'm going to be modding these so that they fit, because I want them to look clean, or as best as I can. My original Firewall, if you remember, was that half height HP case, and I just didn't use these at all, but I don't want to do that here. Making some progress. You can already see that space is at a premium with the power supply and the motherboard plugged in. A couple things that I'm noticing right off the bat. One thing actually is the placement of the power to the motherboard. That's actually sitting underneath what will be the hard drive, and I'm hoping that I have enough clearance to get the actual cable here without having any problems trying to bend this or install it properly so that it doesn't get in the way of the hard drive. Still got to plug in cables to the front, and I still have to worry about modding the network cards, but we're getting there. Norco case came with some special screws for the hard drive cages. They look like that, and the reason why you need those is because the hard drive cages have these little rubber mounts for anti-vibration, and then these install that way so that that smooth part actually sits in the grommet there, and then you still have the threads that go into the hard drive. I've got the motherboard power plugged in, and because this top part of the cable isn't sleeved, I can actually get a nice bend, and in combination with switching over to a flat SATA cable, I was using a 90-degree cable. That actually was coming into contact here and causing an issue, but I switched over to the flat cable, and now this sits nicely. I do have a little contact there, but it's not bad, and then I don't have this hitting the memory, so I think we'll be fine. You know, every time I do a project like this, I always run into a little gotcha. It like never fails. And this is the gotcha for this project. I have 2 SATA power plugs, but this is too short to reach this drive because these are side by side, and this really is meant for 2 hard drives that are stacked one on the other. So I'm either going to have to get an extension or get a Molex to SATA converter. Alright, it's the next day. I called it quits after that last part. I went out this morning and I did pick up a Molex to SATA power cable here and took care of that. And I started to do a little cable management with the power cables here. I just wanted to make sure that all this stuff was as neat as possible, even though I don't have a ton of space. I definitely want to do some basic stuff like make sure I didn't have any cables on top of fans or anything else that's moving. Next thing I need to do is worry about getting these network cards in place. I'm zoomed in on the network card here because I've got the bracket on and I'm fitting it, and if you notice, the front part of the card doesn't sit all the way down. You can actually see the gold contacts here. What's happening is the bracket itself, you can see it there, you can actually hear it, it's hitting the bottom of the case. So what I'm going to have to do is cut a little bit off the bottom, make sure it sits right, and then I'll worry about cutting the top. I've got the bracket, and I'm going to use a little rotary tool to cut the bottom off, and I'm using this box here as like a little cutting station because I just want to contain any kind of dust or anything so that it's not all over my stuff. Done cutting, and you can see I did shave off quite a bit off the bottom of that bracket. I'm actually using the other one as a comparison here, and I'll show you what it looks like in the slot, but it actually fits perfectly now. Alright, there we go, much better. So what I have to do now is make a little mark over here so that I know where I need to bend the top part. I've cut a notch on the side of this thing so it'll make it easier to bend, and I'll put this in a pair of vice grips, and then I'm just going to force it that way. Okay, I've bent the top part and it looks pretty good, I think. And you can see the other side, and you can actually see why it's important to cut that notch there. So now I need to measure the top here so I can cut it that way. Top has been cut, and I've got it back on the network card and on the motherboard so I can actually test fit one more time. So height wise it's okay. I am going to have to cut a little notch on that side so that it doesn't come into contact with that screw, and then I'm going to have to cut like a little notch or a hole on this side so I can actually get the screw in on this side. Overall though, I think it looks pretty good. Well, it's not pretty, but it works. Got the notch cut in. There's enough metal here that I can actually get the screw on top of it so it doesn't move left to right, and the back looks just fine, and I can actually get a network cable in there with no issue, and we're good to go. So now the only thing to do is to replicate that so I can do that for the other network card. I'm all set with the second bracket, and I didn't have to cut any notches like I did on the first one. I'm able to use just a washer with a regular screw, and then that actually holds down both cards, and it works really nicely. So I'm all set with that finally. Everything's in the case finally. Network cards are where they're supposed to be, and from a cable management perspective, all my cables are routed as best as I can. Extra cables are tucked in nicely in that 5 1/4 inch bay. Last thing I need to do is a power up test before I put this in the rack. Everything's powered up, and I'm actually really impressed with how quiet this thing is. The power supply fan is running, but it's pretty much silent. There are 2 out of the 3 40mm fans that I plugged in, and I can't really hear them, but I know that they're pushing air because I can feel them. The loudest thing that I can really hear right now is just the CPU fan, but even that's not very loud at all. So I think from a project perspective, I think I'm going to call this done because it booted up properly, and all I have to do is get the cover back on and find a spot for this thing in the rack. So that about wraps it up. Thanks everybody for watching. Definitely follow me on Twitter. You'll get updates on when new videos are posted, as well as some high quality tweets from me. Definitely like and subscribe because that helps me out a lot. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.